They taught you that walking away means failure, that staying, no matter the cost, makes you loyal, strong, worthy, but no one told you what it does to your soul when you keep standing where you're no longer respected. No one warned you how slowly you disappear when you choose endurance over self-respect. This is not a talk about giving up. This is a talk about knowing when staying is self-betrayal. Sometimes strength isn't holding on tighter. Sometimes strength is turning around, calmly, quietly, and choosing yourself. Today we talk about overcoming the lie of never walk away. They told you never walk away. They said if you leave, you lose. If you stop explaining, you fail. If you don't stay until the very end, it means you weren't strong enough. So you stayed. You stayed when your voice wasn't heard. You stayed when your effort became expected instead of appreciated. You stayed when love turned into negotiation and respect turned into something you had to earn again every morning. You stayed because you were taught that endurance is character and silence is maturity. You stayed because walking away felt like quitting on your own values. But no one talks about what it costs to stay in places where your presence is tolerated but not valued. No one warns you about the slow erosion that happens when you keep choosing patience over truth. You don't break all at once. You wear down. You start doubting instincts that once protected you. You explain yourself more carefully. You apologize more quickly. You shrink your needs so they fit inside someone else's comfort, and you call it loyalty. Never walk away sounds noble until you realize how many people use it to keep you exactly where you are, giving without balance, hoping without proof, waiting without clarity. Some people don't want your growth. They want your availability. They want your consistency, not your wholeness. They want you dependable, predictable, always there, even when they are not. And if you question it, they remind you of that rule again, never walk away. So you tell yourself that staying is strength. You convince yourself that leaving would mean you didn't try hard enough. You replay memories where things were good and use them as evidence that they could be good again. You tell yourself everyone struggles, everyone compromises, everyone sacrifices, and that's true. But sacrifice without reciprocity is not strength. It is self-abandonment disguised as virtue. There is a difference between commitment and attachment to suffering. Commitment has movement. It grows. It breathes. Attachment to suffering just repeats the same cycle and calls it loyalty. You keep showing up to the same conversation that never changes. You keep offering understanding to someone who never listens. You keep explaining your boundaries to people who benefit from ignoring them. And every time you consider leaving, guilt pulls you back because you were taught that walking away is weakness. But strength is not measured by how much pain you can tolerate. Strength is measured by how honestly you can listen to yourself when something is wrong, and your body knows long before your mind admits it. The tightness in your chest, the exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix, the way you rehearse conversations in your head, hoping this time you'll finally be understood. The way you feel relieved when they're gone, then ashamed for feeling relieved. Never walk away becomes a cage when it's not paired with discernment. Staying should be a choice, not a sentence. Staying should come from mutual respect, not fear of loss. When you stay because you're afraid of what leaving says about you, you stop asking what staying is doing to you. You stop asking whether the version of yourself that remains is actually you, or just what's left after compromise. There are moments when staying is brave, and there are moments when staying is avoidance. Walking away is not always an escape. Sometimes it's an act of clarity. Sometimes it's the first honest decision you've made in a long time. You don't walk away to punish anyone. You walk away to stop punishing yourself. You walk away because you finally accept that love without respect is not love. That effort without acknowledgement is not partnership. That presence without peace is not stability. People will misunderstand your silence when you stop explaining. They will call you cold when you choose distance. They will say you changed as if change is betrayal. But what they really mean is that you stop being convenient. You stop bending. You stop carrying what was never meant to be yours alone. And that makes people uncomfortable, especially those who benefited from your endurance. You don't owe everyone access to your energy. You don't owe endless chances to people who refuse accountability. You don't owe your time to environments that require you to be smaller to survive. Walking away does not erase what you gave. It doesn't cancel the love, the effort, the sincerity. It simply marks the moment you realize that continuing would cost you more than leaving. There is a quiet dignity in choosing yourself without drama, no speeches, no ultimatums, just a calm recognition that this place no longer aligns with who you are becoming. You don't need to burn bridges to walk away. You don't need permission. You don't need to convince anyone. You just need to stop betraying your own awareness. Some people stay because they believe suffering proves depth, that if it hurts, it must matter. But pain is not proof of value. Consistency without care is not devotion. Longevity without growth is not success. If you are the only one evolving, the only one reflecting, the only one trying to repair what keeps breaking the same way, then staying is not noble. It's lonely. Never Walk Away was meant to teach perseverance, not self-neglect. Perseverance has direction. It leads somewhere. It builds something new. Self-neglect just keeps you circling the same disappointment, hoping repetition will turn into reward. It doesn't. Patterns don't change because you endure them longer. They change when someone refuses to participate in them anymore. Walking away is not about anger. It's about honesty. It's about recognizing that you can't heal in the same place that keeps wounding you. It's about understanding that love should not require you to abandon your intuition, that respect should not be conditional, that peace should not be something you earn after years of tolerance. You may grieve what you hoped it would become. You may miss the potential more than the reality. You may question yourself in the quiet moments. That's normal. Walking away doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop sacrificing your well-being to keep something alive that no longer feeds you. It means you trust that letting go creates space for something healthier, even if you can't see it yet. Some doors don't close with noise, they close with clarity. One day you realize you're tired of asking for the same things, tired of adjusting your tone so you don't upset anyone, tired of explaining why basic respect matters to you. And in that tiredness, something settles. You don't feel dramatic, you feel done. And that quiet resolve is often the most powerful form of strength. You don't walk away because you hate them. You walk away because you finally love yourself enough to stop negotiating your worth. You walk away because you understand that staying out of fear is not loyalty, it's self-doubt. And self-doubt will keep you in places long after they've stopped serving you. There will be people who only recognize your value once you're gone. That is not your responsibility to fix. There will be people who rewrite the story to protect their comfort. Let them. Your peace does not require their understanding. It requires your alignment. Walking away teaches you something staying never could. It teaches you that you can survive endings, that your identity is not tied to how much you endure, that you are allowed to choose environments that meet you with the same effort you give. It teaches you to trust the part of yourself that whispered long before you listened. Never walk away sounds strong, but knowing when to walk away requires more courage than staying out of habit. It requires self-respect without applause. It requires letting go of being seen as the OD one, the patient one, the one who never leaves. It requires redefining strength as honesty instead of endurance. And once you learn that, you start walking differently everywhere else. You stop over-explaining. You stop chasing closure from people who won't give it. You stop staying where you have to convince others of your value. You start choosing connections that feel mutual, conversations that feel safe, spaces where your presence is welcome, not just used. Walking away doesn't make you hard. It makes you clear. It doesn't make you selfish. It makes you responsible for your own life. And clarity changes everything. It changes how you love. It changes how you work. It changes what you tolerate. You no longer confuse attachment with commitment or endurance with integrity. Some lessons can only be learned by leaving. Some growth only happens when you step out of what's familiar. Some respect only arrives when you give it to yourself first. And that moment when you finally understand that staying is no longer an act of courage, but an act of fear, something shifts inside you quietly, permanently. as you stand there recognizing that you don't need to prove your strength by remaining in places that diminish you. And the decision forms not as an escape, but as an acceptance of what you have known for a long time. That strength was never about never walking away. It was about knowing when to stop walking against yourself. They repeat it like a rule carved into stone: never walk away, as if leaving automatically erases everything you stood for, as if staying is the only proof of depth, of loyalty, of strength. You hear it early, you absorb it quietly, and one day it becomes a voice in your head that questions you every time you feel the urge to step back. It tells you to hold on a little longer, to be patient again, to give one more chance, to endure, because endurance has been romanticized as virtue. So you stay. You stay in conversations that circle but never resolve. You stay in roles that demand more while offering less. You stay because you remember how it started, not how it feels now. You stay because walking away feels like a racing effort, like admitting you misjudged something important. And pride joins the habit. You don't want to be the person who quits. You don't want to confirm the fear that maybe you cared more than they did. What no one tells you is that staying too long teaches you the wrong lessons. It teaches you to ignore discomfort. It teaches you to override intuition. It teaches you to normalize imbalance. Over time, you stop asking whether something is right and start asking how much more you can tolerate. You confuse resilience with numbness. You mistake survival for success. Never walk away becomes a convenient slogan for people who benefit from your hesitation, for people who know that if you pause long enough, you'll talk yourself out of leaving. They don't need to change, they just need you to doubt yourself. And doubt is easier to plant than accountability is to practice. So they remind you of history, of effort already invested, of how far you've come. They remind you of who you used to be, hoping you won't notice who you're becoming. You begin to bargain with yourself. You say things like, maybe it's just a phase, maybe you're expecting too much, maybe this is what commitment looks like. And slowly the bar lowers. Things that once would have felt unacceptable become manageable, then normal, then invisible. You stop reacting because reacting changes nothing. You stop speaking because being heard feels unlikely. You start carrying disappointment quietly because making noise feels pointless. Walking away is framed as dramatic, but staying can be far more destructive. Staying can drain you in ways that don't show immediately. You function, you perform, you smile when required. But there's a heaviness that follows you, a sense that you're always bracing yourself, always waiting for the next letdown, always preparing to adjust again. That weight doesn't come from effort, it comes from imbalance. Strength isn't the ability to endure anything. Strength is discernment. It's knowing the difference between something that challenges you and something that diminishes you. Growth feels uncomfortable, but it also feels alive. Diminishment feels quiet, repetitive, draining. If every day feels like maintenance instead of movement, that's not perseverance. That's stagnation dressed up as loyalty. Never walk away ignores context. It ignores boundaries. It ignores the reality that not everything deserves infinite access to you. Some situations don't improve with time, they just reveal themselves more clearly. And clarity can be unsettling when it contradicts the story you've been telling yourself. You wanted it to work, you believed in its potential. You imagined a future where the effort paid off. Letting go of that image hurts more than letting go of the reality. People often stay because leaving forces them to grieve not just what is, but what could have been. Staying allows hope to linger, even if it's unsupported. Hope can be a powerful thing, but ungrounded hope becomes a trap. It keeps you investing in patterns that have already shown you their limits. It convinces you that patience will fix what honesty hasn't. Walking away doesn't mean you failed, it means you paid attention. It means you noticed that your needs were consistently secondary, that your boundaries were repeatedly tested, that your presence was assumed rather than appreciated. Those observations are not signs of weakness, they're signs of awareness. And awareness, once gained, doesn't disappear. You can ignore it, but it will keep resurfacing louder each time. There's a quiet fear beneath never walk away, the fear of starting over, the fear of being alone, the fear of admitting that you outgrew something. Those fears are understandable. Familiar pain often feels safer than unfamiliar peace. You know how to survive where you are. You don't yet know what leaving will require of you. Uncertainty feels risky. Even when certainty is slowly costing you yourself, you don't walk away in a moment of anger. You walk away after many moments of clarity, after noticing that apologies don't lead to change, after realizing that promises are recycled, after seeing that your effort is expected but theirs is optional. The decision forms quietly. It's not impulsive, it's cumulative. It's built from patterns, not incidents. Some people confuse your patience for permission. They assume your silence means agreement. They mistake your loyalty for limitless tolerance. And as long as you stay, there's no incentive for them to reflect. Your presence absorbs the consequences they should be facing. Walking away removes that buffer. It forces reality to surface. Even if you're no longer there to witness it, you are allowed to leave situations that require you to explain your worth repeatedly. You are allowed to step back from dynamics where respect is conditional. You are allowed to choose peace over proving a point. Walking away is not about making a statement to others. It's about making a decision for yourself. Never walk away implies that endurance is the highest value, but integrity matters too. Alignment matters. You shouldn't have to fracture yourself to maintain something. You shouldn't have to silence parts of who you are to be accepted. If staying requires you to betray your own sense of rightness, then leaving is not betrayal. It's self-respect. There's a moment when you stop asking for change and start observing behavior, when you stop explaining and start listening, when you realize that what you've been calling misunderstanding is actually disregard. That realization doesn't always bring relief. Sometimes it brings sadness, sometimes it brings anger, but it also brings honesty, and honesty changes the direction of your life. Walking away teaches you that endings don't erase meaning. They refine it. What you experienced mattered. What you learned stays with you. Leaving doesn't invalidate the past. It simply acknowledges the present. You can honor what was without sacrificing what is. You can appreciate lessons without staying enrolled in the same class forever. People might say you gave up too soon. They don't see the nights. You weighed your options. They don't feel the exhaustion of trying to make something work alone. They don't live inside the compromises you've been making. Their judgment is based on appearance. Your decision is based on lived reality. Those are not equal perspectives. When you finally allow yourself to walk away, something shifts. Not immediately, not dramatically, but subtly. You notice how much energy returns when you're no longer bracing yourself. You notice how your thoughts become clearer when they're not consumed by justifying someone else's behavior. You notice how silence becomes restful instead of tense. These changes don't announce themselves, they simply arrive. Never walk away was meant to encourage resilience, but resilience without self-awareness becomes self-erasure. You don't exist to prove how much you can endure. You exist to live fully, honestly, in alignment with your values. If staying pulls you away from that, then leaving is not a loss, it's a correction. You don't need a dramatic reason to walk away. You don't need a final argument or a clear villain. Sometimes the reason is simply that you've changed, that your standards evolved, that what once felt acceptable no longer does. Growth creates distance, and distance is not always something to close. Sometimes it's something to respect. Walking away doesn't guarantee ease. It guarantees truth, and truth can be uncomfortable before it becomes freeing. You may miss the familiar, you may question your timing, you may replay conversations in your head, but beneath all of that, there's a saint. Ediness that wasn't there before, a sense that you're no longer at war with your own awareness. Never walk away loses its power when you realize that staying is not automatically virtuous. Context matters, balance matters, mutual effort matters. You are not obligated to stay where you are unseen. You are not required to endure patterns that don't evolve. You are not responsible for carrying what others refuse to acknowledge. The strongest people are not those who stay at all costs. They are the ones who know when staying costs too much. They are the ones who can release attachment without bitterness, who can leave without needing to be understood, who can trust themselves enough to step into uncertainty rather than remain in quiet erosion. Walking away doesn't harden you, it clarifies you, it teaches you to listen sooner next time. It teaches you that boundaries are not threats, they're filters. It teaches you that your time and energy are finite, and where you place them shapes your life. These lessons don't come from slogans, they come from experience. You don't walk away because you stopped caring. You walk away because you started caring about the right things, about your peace, about your alignment, about your future. And once you understand that, the old rule loses its grip. Never walk away stops sounding like strength and starts sounding like fear dressed as principle, and you stand there recognizing that choosing yourself is not an act of defiance, but an act of clarity that forms quietly inside you as you accept that staying is no longer an expression of courage, but a refusal to listen to what you already know, and that understanding settles into you without noise, as the awareness that your life is shaped not by how long you endure, but by how honestly you respond to what no longer fits. They handed you that phrase like a badge of honor, never walk away, as if staying is always proof of courage and leaving is always proof of weakness. It sounds simple when life is simple. It sounds noble when you don't yet understand what it asks of you. Over time, it becomes a quiet command, running in the background of your decisions, shaping what you tolerate, what you excuse, and what you convince yourself is normal. So you learn to stay. You stay through confusion, because clarity might end things. You stay through disappointment, because admitting it hurts more than enduring it. You stay because you remember who you were when it began, hopeful, invested, certain that effort would be met with effort. You stay because walking away feels like erasing your own sincerity, like admitting that all the patience you gave didn't lead where you thought it would. Never walk away teaches you to glorify endurance, to believe that if something matters, it must hurt. That difficulty equals depth. That struggle is evidence of meaning, and sometimes that's true. Growth isn't comfortable. Commitment requires effort. But there's a difference between effort that builds and effort that drains. There's a difference between challenges that strengthen you and patterns that slowly wear you down until you forget what ease feels like. Staying becomes automatic. You stop checking in with yourself. You stop asking whether you're okay here. Instead, you ask how to adjust, how to adapt, how to explain yourself better, how to be more patient, how to want less. And each adjustment seems small, reasonable, even mature, until one day you realize you've adjusted yourself out of alignment. You begin to sense it in subtle ways. The way your enthusiasm fades faster, the way silence feels heavy instead of peaceful, the way you hesitate before speaking because you're already anticipating resistance. You notice that you're always the one repairing, clarifying, smoothing things over. You tell yourself it's temporary. You tell yourself everyone has rough patches. You tell yourself this is what commitment looks like. But commitment without reciprocity becomes obligation. Loyalty without respect becomes burden. And never walk away doesn't prepare you for that truth. It doesn't teach you how to recognize when staying is no longer an act of strength, but an act of fear. Fear of change, fear of loneliness, fear of admitting that something you believed in isn't becoming what you hoped. People rarely leave because of one moment. They leave because of accumulation, because of repeated dismissals disguised as misunderstandings, because of patterns that don't shift, no matter how clearly they're named, because of apologies that sound sincere but lead nowhere. Leaving is often the last step, not the first. It comes after patience has been stretched thin and hope has been tested repeatedly. Never walk away can keep you trapped in the past. It ties you to the version of something that existed once and asks you to ignore the reality of what it has become. You stay loyal to memory instead of responding to the present. You defend potential instead of acknowledging behavior. You invest in who someone could be rather than who they consistently are. Walking away feels like admitting defeat only because we've been taught to measure success by duration. How long did you stay? How much did you endure? How much did you sacrifice? But longevity alone doesn't define value. Something can last a long time and still be unhealthy. Something can end and still be meaningful. Staying requires honesty too, honest assessment of whether there is growth, honest recognition of whether effort is mutual, honest awareness of how it affects your sense of self. If staying requires you to silence your intuition, to minimize your needs, to accept patterns that erode your confidence, then it's not perseverance. It's self-neglect wearing the mask of virtue. Never walk away ignores the reality that people and circumstances change, that what once fit may no longer fit. Growth creates distance, and that distance isn't always meant to be closed. Sometimes it's meant to be acknowledged. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit that you've outgrown a situation instead of forcing yourself to remain loyal to a version of yourself that no longer exists. You don't wake up one day and decide to leave without care. You wake up one day and realize how much care you've already given. You realize that you've explained the same things in different words, that you've adjusted your expectations again and again, that you've been patient in ways that cost you clarity, and that realization doesn't arrive with anger, it arrives with exhaustion. Walking away is often quiet. There's no dramatic exit, no announcement, just a decision that settles inside you, a recognition that you can't keep asking for the same respect, that you can't keep investing in a dynamic that doesn't evolve, that staying is no longer aligned with who you are becoming. People may accuse you of giving up. They may say you didn't fight hard enough. They don't see the internal battles. They don't feel the weight of staying. They don't carry the compromises you've been making in silence. Their perspective is limited to what's visible. Yours is shaped by what you live with every day. Never walk away also teaches you to ignore your body. The body always knows before the mind catches up. The tension that doesn't ease, the fatigue that lingers, the sense of being constantly on edge. These are not signs of weakness, they're signals that something is misaligned, signals that staying is costing you more than you admit. Walking away isn't about rejecting commitment, it's about honoring it correctly. Commitment should be to values, not just to situations, to respect, not just to history, to mutual growth, not just to shared time. When a situation consistently violates your values, staying loyal to it means betraying yourself. Never walk away makes leaving sound like abandonment, but sometimes leaving is the most honest response to reality. You can't fix what you're not allowed to address. You can't build with someone who refuses to meet you halfway. You can't heal in an environment that keeps reopening the same wound. There's also the fear of wasted effort, the thought that if you leave, everything you gave was for nothing. But effort isn't wasted just because it doesn't lead where you expected. You learn what you're capable of. You learn what you value. You learn what you will and won't accept. Those lessons stay with you long after the situation ends. Staying out of fear doesn't protect you from loss, it just stretches it out. It turns sharp endings into slow erosion. Walking away concentra tes the pain, but it also allows healing to begin. Staying delays both, and delay has its own cost. Never walk away encourages you to tolerate ambiguity indefinitely, to live in the space of maybe it will change, maybe they'll understand, maybe it will get better. And while maybe keeps hope alive, it also keeps you suspended. You can spend years waiting for clarity that never arrives, mistaking patience for progress. Walking away creates clarity even when it hurts. It forces you to face what is instead of what you wish it were. It requires you to trust your own assessment rather than external approval. It asks you to value your peace as much as you once valued perseverance. You don't owe permanence to anything that consistently costs you your well-being. You don't owe endless chances to patterns that remain unchanged. You don't owe access to people who dismiss your boundaries. Walking away is not a failure of character. It's an assertion of self-respect. Never walk away can make you feel responsible for outcomes that aren't yours to control. You start believing that if you just try harder, say it differently, wait a little longer, things will shift. That belief keeps the burden on you. Walking away releases that false responsibility. It acknowledges that some things are not yours to fix. There is grief in leaving, grief for the future you imagined, grief for the version of yourself that believed it would turn out differently, grief for the comfort of familiarity. That grief doesn't mean the decision is wrong. It means the investment was real. You can honor that without continuing to sacrifice yourself. Never walk away often comes from fear dressed as principle. Fear of being judged, fear of regret, fear of standing alone. But fear is not a reliable guide for how to live. Awareness is, integrity is, alignment. Walking away teaches you that you can survive endings, that your worth isn't dependent on being chosen or stayed with, that you don't disappear when something ends. In fact, parts of you come back. Energy returns, clarity sharpens, you start recognizing yourself again. You begin to understand that staying and leaving are not moral opposites. They're contextual choices. Both can be brave, both can be fearful. The difference lies in why you choose them. Staying out of love and mutual respect is strength. Staying out of fear and obligation is not. Never walk away simplifies a complex truth. Life isn't about holding on at all costs. It's about responding honestly to change. It's about adjusting when growth demands it. It's about releasing what no longer aligns so you can make space for what does. You don't walk away because you stop believing in commitment. You walk away because you started believing in yourself, because you recognize that your time, your energy, your emotional capacity are finite, because you understood that being present in your own life matters more than maintaining appearances. And once you allow yourself to walk away when staying no longer makes sense, you carry that lesson forward. You listen sooner. You notice patterns earlier. You set boundaries with less guilt. You choose situations that don't require constant self-justification. You stop proving your strength through endurance and start expressing it through discernment. Never walk away loses its authority when you realize that your life is shaped by the choices you make in moments of clarity, not by slogans repeated out of habit, and that understanding settles in quietly, not as rebellion, but as acceptance, as the recognition that strength was never about staying no matter the cost. It was about being honest enough to see when the cost has become too high and trusting yourself enough to respond to that truth as it stands before you without the need for approval, explanation, or permission. As the awareness deepens and reshapes how you move forward, carrying with you the calm certainty that choosing yourself is not abandonment, but alignment, and that alignment changes everything as it takes root within you and continues to guide you in ways that feel steady, grounded, and unmistakably your own.